What's up, Devy peoples? It's Thursday night in Massachusetts and in Tennessee, and we're back to wrap up the SEC. We're coming at you with the SEC East this time. We got a lot of fun teams to talk about. Kyle, how you feeling about it?
Yeah, a completely unbiased episode of the Devy Dose upcoming right here.
People that have never met you or heard you on Twitter might not know that you
I
are
mean,
actually a
if you're
Tennessee
watching
fan.
on the if
On
you're watching on
Tubeview.
YouTube, I am wearing the shirt, so I think
Strangely
I
enough,
tried to make it obvious.
yes, our SEC preview might have a lot of orange in it. The thumbnails is going to be a little bit of orange in it too. Suspiciously unbiased.
Who did that?
Yeah, Kyle did, and it looks phenomenal. Way better than the ones that I was making, and I haven't made one in a month, anyways. So this one will look good. It'll look good coming to you, Shadies and Lentilman out there in YouTube land. We got a lot of fun teams. We got a lot of fun players to get to. This is going to be another behemoth 2-hour episode, no matter what we do. I mean, we could probably spend 2 hours just talking about Tennessee and Georgia, and yet we also have inconveniently 5 other teams that have just enough to warrant consideration here.
Yeah, 5 other teams that account for like 2 top 5 Devy wide receivers at least, and
yeah,
I don't know. There's probably a running back somewhere. And there's Vandy, but
and then there's Vandy. There's some hidden gems in here too, though. So I'm excited to talk about even some of the lower class guys here. But so Kyle, you're batting leadoff, man. What do you got?
I will go first with Kentucky, kind of the middle of the pack of my teams for today. The big news in terms of their offense is that Liam Cohen returns as the offensive coordinator. He was their offensive coordinator back in 2021 and then went to the Los Angeles Rams last year and now moves back to Kentucky after just 1 year. Obviously, back in 2021, Will Levis, Chris Rodriguez, Wan'Dale Robinson all had very good CFF seasons. It's a very pro-style offense. I think it'll benefit the running back position. Will be better than it was last year, back to the 2021 type running back. And I think it will help the quarterback position, not in terms of CFF, but in terms of Devy. I think NFL scouts are going to like to see a quarterback who plays in the system, as it is very pro style. And speaking of quarterbacks, we'll start there. They get a pretty significant transfer. Devin Leary transfers in from NC State. For me, I think he's one of probably a top 3 to 5 transfer quarterback in this year's class. So a good get for Kentucky to replace Will Levis. Devin Leary is a very accurate quarterback. He has plus athleticism as well. Can make plays with his legs, kind of extend plays, but just puts the ball in front of his wide receivers in places that they can take it further up the field. I mean, he has a 71% adjusted completion percentage. 2022 last year at NC State, he dealt with some injuries, but back in 2021, he had a 85.1 passing grade on PFF, which is pretty darn good. I think Leary is a big get in terms of the wide receivers in this room. I think he's better for these 2 wide receivers that we all tend to like than Will Levis was, even if he's less of an NFL prospect. I'm not sold on Leary as an NFL prospect. I mean, there was a dream there back in 2021, 2020 at NC State. I'm not totally sure it's completely dead, but I don't have the same type of aspirations as I did back then.
I think it's very unlikely he's a round 1 or round 2 quarterback. I think he's probably gets drafted on day 3 as a camp body. Unless he blows up, and then maybe he becomes a round 3, round 4 guy.
Yeah, he doesn't really have like that kind of like rocket arm or anything to like wow people, but I think he's a very good college quarterback, so good place for Kentucky to be at. And then they bring in another transfer that I think is going to make an instant impact on this offense, and that is former Temple and Vanderbilt running back Ray Davis. Ray Davis last year had 233 carries for 1,044 yards with 5 touchdowns and added 29 receptions for 169 yards. Had an 85 PFF rush grade last year, so a very solid player who made the most of his carries behind a Vanderbilt offensive line that just did not match up with most of its opponents. He's 5 foot
take.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. I was gonna say he's gonna be this year's Kenny Walker in terms of the transfer guy that takes off and gets Devy hype. I don't think he's athletic the way Kenny Walker was.
No, he's
not.
But
I think otherwise the parallels are there, and he will get some draft consideration. And I think he's gonna really smash Kentucky.
Yeah, I personally love him for CFF this year. I'm not sold on Devy because, like you said, he's not super athletic. I don't think he has an athletic trait that stands out. He's athletic enough for sure. Like in terms of like everything, he's kind of well-rounded and to that level to like play in the NFL. But I don't think he's more than a guy at the NFL level. He does have requisite size, though, at 5'10", 216. Obviously, those 29 receptions last year means he can catch the ball. So there are things to like in that profile for sure. And then for Kentucky standards, this wide receiver room is absolutely stacked. Berrien Brown is the big name in Devy that we like. Also the most productive last year as a true freshman. He's a guy with 98th percentile speed. He's 6'1", just 166, but doesn't really matter that he's kind of that thin at that speed because I mean that's what you want. Last season as a true freshman, he had 51 receptions for 625 yards and 4 touchdowns. That was good for 2.2 yards per route run, which is excellent for a true freshman season. And he played just 28.8% in the slot. I thought that number would be higher considering, his size and his skill set. But the fact that they're willing to play him outside and he's getting those outside reps, I think is going to be huge for his future NFL potential. Big fan of Berrien Brown in general. And then they also had another true freshman pop off that was more under the radar in last year's class, not a guy that many people were talking about, and that's Dane Key. Dane Key is 6'3", 195, had 37 receptions, 519 yards, and 6 touchdowns last year. He's definitely not Berrien Brown levels of speed or athleticism in any way. He's not really a special athlete at all. Kind of like Ray Davis, he's good enough, but not really outstanding in any one field. I think Dane Key is an all right wide receiver. I think he's a future round 3 or 4 pick. I just don't see a ceiling that's very high. Would you tend to agree with that, or are you higher on Dane Key?
I think many people disagree with you. There's a lot of folks, at least in the Devy community, that do think he's a day 2 guy. I've seen his speed advertised as being like high 4.4s, which is obviously plenty enough for a boundary receiver in the NFL. But I mean, obviously, there's so much conjecture that flies around when these guys are young prospects. Like that could be completely fabricated. But on film, it looks like that to me. I mean, he can get behind guys. He's certainly not like a 4.40, 4.39 guy, but he can get there and he can get up and get the ball too. So I think you're underrating his athleticism for sure. Too early for me to really say anything about him being a day 2 pick or not. But I mean, if I was going to draft the class tomorrow, he would be just on dint of him having outperformed most of the other members of his class in terms of data metrics that I give a crap about.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Definitely productive as a freshman. I want to see him take another step. So obviously he'll get that chance this year. And then former Virginia Tech transfer Tavion Robinson is still around as well in this wide receiver room. He is going into his 5th collegiate season. Last year, he had 41 receptions, 502 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's 5'11", 194, and a slot guy in this offense. Last year, he played 71% of his snaps in the slot. Just a decent college wide receiver, Tavion Robinson. Nothing to write home about, but interest could do something for CFF, maybe, but I don't see it unless there's an injury. Other than just cannibalizing some targets from these other guys we like. And then I wasn't really impressed with Kentucky's 2023 recruiting class. There's nobody in terms of the skill positions that really stuck out. They do bring in Shamar Porter, who is the wide receiver 27 on 24/7 Sports, a 4-star prospect out of Nashville. He's a big-bodied guy. I mean, he's 6'3", 192, has good length, good can add weight to his frame. Good athleticism for his size. I think Shamar Porter is a semi-interesting wide receiver prospect, not a guy that many of us are super high on, but a name to monitor considering the success that Kentucky has been having or had last year with true freshman wide receivers. And then at tight end, they had a guy last year who was semi-interesting, and that is Jordan Dingle. He was the starting tight end last year as a redshirt freshman. He's 6'4", 238, and accounted for 20 receptions, 220 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, that was his first full season starting, so a guy to keep an eye on, a guy that could take another step or two in the next 2 seasons, and definitely be at least CFF relevant as a redshirt junior or senior.
I just want to call him Jordan Dingleberry because I'm 2 years old.
Yeah. I thought just Dingle by itself was funny enough. So
it's pretty funny. Yeah, pretty funny. You get tough if your name is John Dingle, Jordan Dingle. You know what I mean? That dude fought in junior high.
All right. That's all I got for Kentucky. I'm gonna check your ranks here.
I don't think I care about Tavion Robinson. Do you?
No. Just
I don't care.
Figured I'd bring him up because he's a projected starter.
Yeah. No. And then I put Berrien. If you're listening and not watching this, I put Berrien between Malik Neighbors and Tet McMillan at our wide receiver 7 for Devy. How do you feel about
I'm much higher.
I mean, I could see him. I wouldn't put him any high. I could do a wide receiver 4. That's the range. I think that's a tier. I just think Worthy's got a lot of the same assets. He's not as long, and he's already produced well, and he's coming out this year. Kind of the same thing I feel about Neighbors. You know what I mean? I think Berrien's got vastly more athleticism than Neighbors, and Neighbors is athletic. Berrien's just a freak. So a little bit more just they've done more to date. But, yeah, if you want to swap them with Neighbors.
Let's meet in the middle and just move them up.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, Worthy is definitely a round 1 wide receiver, right? So it's Berrien, Brown.
I think Brown is too.
Brown could be a top 10 wide receiver, a top 10 draft pick. He's got to do some stuff first, though, right?
Does he? Other than run the 40?
Good point. Yeah. The thing I like about Brown, too, is he's got all that athleticism, and he's not 5'8". He's 6'0". Yeah. He's a little bit light, but not crazy light. So, yeah, legit.
For sure.
I'd like to see him. Am I right in thinking that he played mainly out of the slot last year?
No, you are not correct. I also had that premonition, but I will pull the number up. It was lower than I expected. He had a 28.8% slot rate.
Nice. I know I
So he
have some
played-
highlights that were in
Yeah.
my head that he was definitely coming out of the slot on like deep posts. But
yeah, I mean, Tavion definitely had all those slot reps, so
Yeah.
I could see
Makes
him like
sense.
moving in there after Tavion's gone next year, just out of kind of necessity because Porter's definitely an outside guy if he's going to be the next guy up. So
yeah, or maybe they rotate guys in and out. I think all
Yeah.
both of him and Key can play slot, so maybe that becomes a thing for them. So yeah, great. So anyone that you didn't like where I put him? Did you think you smashed down my Ray Davis? No, you left him. I put Ray Davis behind Fegan, behind Cook, ahead of Damari Alston, ahead of Le'Veon Moss. Caleb Jackson.
No, I like that. I like that a lot, actually. I couldn't put him higher, actually, but
Well, I can put him higher, and I started to put him ahead of many of those younger guys, but I think a guy like Cook or Fegan has just more upside.
That's exactly
exactly
the thought process that went through my head as I was saying that sentence.
Yeah, I am sure Ray Davis is not a UDFA, to be honest. I'm sure he's probably like around 5, round 6 or better pick. If he went out in the draft this year, I think he would have been, a midday 3 pick, right? So he's playing in the NFL. I think we got some guys ahead of him that aren't going to make the NFL, but that if they hit can, maybe have a little bit of a higher ceiling.
It's part of the fun.
Part of the fun, right? Of Devy.
He's going to come out as a 5th-year senior though at running back. Obviously not as big a deal as wide receiver, but that does give me some pause.
Yeah, I mean, you had a lot of injuries, so you lost a whole season, right?
His
junior year,
close to it.
Lost his junior year. Yeah. Now, what did you think about Barry Brown and Dane Key for CFF? I think there's so much variance possible there.
Yeah, I mean, they were only like 600-yard receivers last year. I think Kentucky, I'm not even sold they'll pass that much more. I think they'll pass a little bit more. But no, I like where you have them, I think. Well, actually, I feel like Brown should be ahead of like Chambers. Maybe Cephas.
I don't know. I think Chambers, some like CFF lists has him as like a 20-point per game guy, 18 to 20, which is like, 900 yards and 10 touchdowns or something like that, right? So
yeah, I don't know. I still find that difficult just because that's like more production than he had at FIU. And now
that one year he was a 20-point per game guy.
Yeah, that one year he had a 25 yards per reception.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening in the Big Ten.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah, I put Berrien up there. I got no issues with that at all. I just like I wouldn't be surprised if he went nuts this year, but I
wouldn't be like surprised either. I also wouldn't be surprised if he has 400 yards.
I won't be surprised if they each have 700 yards again, and that's what you get out of them for college.
Until like Tavion's gone, and maybe they can take a bigger piece of the pie even. But having a 5th-year senior around is not the greatest.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, where I'm coming from is that I think Leary is significantly better as a college quarterback than what's his face was, and I don't know. He'll get them the ball, and I think they pass more because I think they're going to have more consistency at the position. So
I agree that they'll be better than last year. It's just hard to see the passing volume going way up, and I think that's the issue with Kentucky.
They got the offensive coordinator back in Tavian Robinson's season, where he went just bonkers in the slot. Yeah, sorry, Wandale's, where he went bonkers. He was a 1,100-yard guy that year. So
but there weren't two of them.
It's true. I feel like there was someone else that caught some passes, though. Josh Ali went for like 700 yards that year, But like Josh Ali's probably Dane Key. Dane Key's better, and then, Wandale, Short King's probably Berrien, but Berrien's better. So, all right. Enough said about Kentucky?
I believe so.
Cool. Could be a fun team this year. So I guess let's get into the meat of it. Georgia, knock this one out before all the kids have to go to sleep. Georgia, obviously the defending CFB champions, and just, recruited with the same potency this year as they have for the past couple of years. One significant change, and I do think this matters, particularly for CFF, is that Todd Monken, who is a damn good coordinator for them, is gone. They got Mike Bobo, who is experienced and competent, I am sure, but I don't think he's the same caliber of offense caller as Todd Monken. He was a coordinator at Georgia for 5 years, 2007 to 2012. Developed Matt Stafford during that time. Stafford was good in college and obviously got drafted like number 1, number 2 overall. Since then, his track record's been less great. He was a coach at South Carolina for a couple of years, and then he was Auburn's OC in 2021, which was not memorable for anything good, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's that bad of a downgrade in terms of like pure CFF production. I think he's not going to hit the same like real production that Monken got, because Monken was just so good at like knowing when to push the ball downfield, and like when to make certain plays, when to be aggressive and when to not be. But Bobo has a decent track record, actually. I mean, back when he was the head coach of Colorado State, his wide receiver ones, Rashard Higgins, Michael Gallup, Preston Williams, and Warren Jackson, all of which went for 75-plus receptions and over 1,200 yards in their respective seasons.
Interesting.
So large boundary wide receivers, absolutely ate in his offenses. I think that role might be Brock Bowers at Georgia.
Probably Brock Bowers, yeah.
But I think he'll be very similar to Monken, actually. He was on the staff last year.
Yeah, he was a consultant last year.
Yeah, so I think everything's going to stay the same in terms of like verbiage and plays.
I'm pretty sure Kirby Smart's going to say, go do that. Go do that again.
Yeah.
Right. But like you said, some of the just like instinctual, and creative aspect of play calling might not hit the same heights that Monken did. But yeah, I think the bones of it will be exactly the same. I don't think why would you mess with success? So QB this year, it's going to be Carson Beck against all my best intentions. I got one team where I actually have Brock Vandegrift, who I drafted as a freshman, and then Gunnar Stockton, who I drafted as a freshman. So I was quite dismayed to see the Carson Beck hype this spring, and it has held. And look, it looks like Carson Beck's probably a good quarterback, probably a good college quarterback. Obviously quarterback at Georgia's got a lot of assets going for them in terms of just a dominant offensive line that's going to make you look good. Balanced offense, some real talent across the middle. And he was good last year. It's 26 for 35. They're 310 yards. That's an adjusted yards per attempt of 11, which is phenomenal. That was significantly better than Stetson Bennett's 4-0 touchdown to interception ratio. Everyone's been singing his praises through the spring, through the fall. So Bennett was good for 23.9 yards per game, points per game last year. I don't know if Beck's going to run like Bennett did. Bennett is very athletic. So, maybe you don't get that same rushing floor, but I think Beck's going to be pretty decent.
Beck's a guy who has pedigree for sure. I mean, he was like QB5 in his class, 2021, I believe. And highly touted among recruiting sites. So,
yeah. So
definitely not the athlete that Bennett was, but
yeah, or either of the guys behind him. I mean, that was the exciting thing. If Vandegrift or Stockton could get the ball, both of them were extraordinarily athletic. Both of them were just vastly productive in high school ball, playing at high levels. At this point, one of them is going to have to transfer because you got Dylan Raiola coming in next year, and Raiola ain't sitting for 2 years. He'll redshirt his freshman year, and then he is starting his second year. So That does not leave enough room at the table for both of these guys to eat. I'm kind of surprised one of them didn't transfer this year, but I guess that's a testament to, what they do there, that they want to be team guys and be available and try to be the next man up when they can.
I think Brock Vandegrift is bad. I don't think he's good. Stockton's a little exciting, but I don't think Vandegrift is anything, personally.
Yeah. He's played about the same as Stockton in all the scrimmages. It's always, anytime you read the beats, they're like, they both did pretty good, So I know there's a lot of negative Vandegrift feeling. I have no real opinion or stake in it, but yeah. So running backs, kind of a mess for CFF purposes. There's just a lot of bodies. Not a ton of separation outside of Dijun. Edwards is the RB1, at least unless Milton gets suddenly healthier than he's ever been in his career. This isn't surprising. Dijun Edwards was the 2 last year. He ran well when he got the ball. He went for 11.2 points per game behind McIntosh last year. And McIntosh, to remind you, because it sometimes doesn't seem like he was that good. He went for 1,300 total yards and 12 touchdowns last year. So that is a useful asset. Edwards is not the pass catcher that McIntosh is, but he's probably a little bit more athletic, which isn't hard. McIntosh was not extraordinarily fast. Was obviously strong and a tackle breaker. Edwards is the first guy up. Kendall Milton, has had kid came in with all the talent in the world and just has not been able to stay healthy. He's not been able to stay on the field. He played a little bit last year. Went for about, 11 points per game. And he's not back yet. He's not back in practice yet. So he's definitely the most talented veteran on the team. But at this point, I have a hard time seeing him as anything more than a rotational guy for Georgia this year. And I have a hard time giving him significant draft capital just because an NFL team is not going to draft a guy that just can't stay healthy. They're just not. They're going to draft them late, take a flyer. They get that Kayshon Boutte type, draft capital. And that's for the best you're going to get, which is a bummer for Millen. Look, maybe he gets healthy and goes off, but history has told me that's not exceptionally likely. It looks like the RB2 right now is one Andrew Paul, which if you are a Campus to Canton brand disciple, you're excited about that because you probably drafted the crap out of him last year. Paul was kind of like a late riser for the services, but is just an exceptional athlete. 5'11", 220 is a recruit and fast as hell. And it's showing out in practice now. I think there's a world where he's like rotating 1A, 1B with Dijun. But they like Edwards. I don't want to downplay that. And Edwards was a good 4-star recruit too. He was like RB 10 or 12 or something in his class. He was nothing to sneeze at. Paul was probably the more exciting of the guys for Devy upside. But looks like some kind of just multi-headed monster there for them. And interestingly, the RB3 from all of the beat reports actually is Cash Jones. Cash Jones. That's right, Kyle. I said it. Look, the kid's 170 pounds. He's vastly undersized. He was a 3-star, but he's been playing well. And he's got the spot on the depth chart ahead of Roderick Robinson. And then they got one other body there, too, that I can't remember who's had his moments. But
Branson Robinson?
No.
Are you forgetting Branson Robinson?
Branson Robinson is hurt.
Okay.
Not playing yet. So
okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So
he's the real RB3. Cash Jones is just some guy.
I like it. Well, we'll see, right? We always have these ideas about these Devy guys that we like, and then sometimes our ideas do not match up well with reality.
Have you seen a picture of Branson Robinson before? I think he'll get on the field.
Yeah, he'll be all right. Also, I see that you have ranked Roderick Robinson ahead of Bronson, and you are wrong.
Roderick Robinson's insane.
He is, but he's
Roderick Robinson is one of 5 players ever over 230 pounds to run 23 miles an hour in high school.
Yeah. All right. I didn't know it was that fast. I guess, was that a CTC in-house?
Yeah.
Fuck. Yeah. I don't know. Could happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to know with Branson because obviously, like you said, he's hurt. I'm not sure where he's going to fit in with Paul is the thing. Like if he's like the clear 2 over Paul, then yeah, he should be probably ahead of Roderick. But I like Roderick's upside more, I think. They're very similar, don't get me wrong. I just think Roderick has an extra gear.
Yeah, if Roderick really is that fast, then yeah, that's tough to ignore. You're basically Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, interesting. So again, like someone's going to disappoint us from this group, right? Like obviously. And also you're probably not getting anything you like for CFF out of any of Roderick or Branson this year. Paul has a shot, I think. I mean, Roderick could light it up, but I mean, you wait your turn at Georgia. You do, you know. So yeah, Branson could get some work this year. I think it's exceedingly unlikely that Roderick gets anything more than some carries and some blowouts and some bowl game action, right? But that's when we'll know, right? We'll see him in the bowl game.
Well, not if it's a playoff, which we probably expect. Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, it just feels like though, like the skill gap between the younger guys, like in terms of athleticism and like the things you can't really coach, compared to the older guys, is bigger than it usually is.
Yeah, definitely feels that way. And yet also, like, man, they ran Kenny McIntosh out there all year last year, and they put Daiju and Edwards right behind him. You know, I think Kirby cares more about you doing what you're supposed to be doing when you do it than, you know, athleticism or upside. You know, he wants guys their team. I'm not saying that the younger guys can't do that, but I hear you. The athleticism with all 3 of those guys is bonkers. And it's not exciting with Daijun. You know, Daijun, again, he's one of those guys. He's going to get drafted, but, like, he's probably going to get drafted on day 3 because there's just not enough there for the NFL to get excited about. And, again, I think he was, like, 4 or 6 as a recruit. So I might have even been wrong in saying he was more athletic than McIntosh. I think he's, like, literally the same player with less pass catching side. So not an exciting Devy piece, but we got to talk about him. Wide receiver at Georgia is there's some guys, but we probably don't care too much for CFF. Lad McConkey was kind of the one last year. He was good for 13.7 points per game, so that's like flexible, right? But not much more than that, and I don't see that really improving. I think he's actually got at least as much talent around him this year. So he's like nominally the one, but I think Dominic Lovett is a significantly better player in just every way, honestly. He's really good. Lovett's going to be playing out of the slot. Dominic Lovett led all returning FBS wide receivers last year in yards per route run against man with like 8 yards per route run. And it wasn't like 5 targets. He had like 30 targets against man or 40 and still had just really bonkers numbers. And we watched film of him. You see like really high level ball skills come up. He's not big, but he's fast enough to be an NFL player at his size, which is, you know, he's like 5'10", 180-ish, but that like AB type build. So he's really interesting to me. I think he's a guy I'm trying to target because I think there's not enough hype around him really for the skill level he has, and in my opinion, his potential in the draft. So, I mean, I don't think he's a top, 15 draft pick, but I think he's a day 2 wide receiver all day long for sure. And then Marcus Rosemy-Jackson is nominally the starting X receiver, but I I mean, he's been a rotational player for 3 years. He hasn't really been anything other than that. I think he's a senior, so he earned the
He's
spot.
still around?
Still around, right? Yeah, all the rest of the guys from that like era have transferred out, but he's still there. I sounds like 3-star wide receiver Dylan Bell from last year might actually be the real starting X, or at least might be splitting the position with Rosemy. Look, he's 6'2", 205. He's fast enough, like probably 4.5 type speed. He ran at 11.100 in high school, so that's kind of roughly how that transfers. I think he's a great Devy buy too. I mean, he's unrostered in leagues, and he's got a path to being like a George Pickensy, like outside receiver, and he has a path to the draft. He's certainly not locked in, but you could do worse at his cost than Dylan Bell. There's some other names there. I mean, Arian Smith's had moments of hype. He's absurdly fast. Again, hasn't stayed on the field. Probably has lost his starting spot, but probably comes out in specific packages because he would be playing behind Lad McConkey, who they love. Rara Thomas had a little hype. He's like third on the depth chart. In his spot, third. So he's probably a rotational guy at best. And they brought in some freshmen that I don't care that much about. Tyler Williams, wide receiver 17 in his class, 6'3", 205. He's got a decent bet to be a thing, but the other two guys, Anthony Evans, Zeed Haynes, I mean, any one of these guys can be something. Georgia certainly has pulled lower recruited players up and, had them succeed, but I don't think you can consider any of these guys as locked into anything. They're not that level of talent, but you can't count them out either. So, keep an eye on them. If one of these guys is on the field by, week 6, then I'm in, obviously the real strong point here for Georgia, the tight end position, where they are just turning into an absolute NFL tight end factory. Just the next few years, they're going to have a top tight end going to the NFL every year. Last year it was Washington. And Washington was the tight end too on his own team, right? Brock Bowers, clear Devy tight end 1. 16 point per game last year in our born and raised league. Depending on your league, he might have been better than that. He's listed at 6'4", 240 right now, which is a little better than he was recruited at. And he's just absurdly athletic for a big guy. I mean, he ran 4.5 as a high school sophomore, probably faster than that now, which is just stupid speed for a tight end. And he just moves well too. I mean, he's an absolute weapon. He's like, I'd say he's a fair lock for a top 8 draft slot in the NFL, right? Like he doesn't get out of the first quarter of the first round.
Yeah.
He could fall a little more. He's not as big as Kyle Pitts was, but I still think the NFL wants these weapons. And I think it's going to be, Marv as the first pass catcher off the board. And I think Brock is going to be the second pass catcher off the board in next year's draft. And the thing is, they just have a list of guys behind him. I mean, Oscar Delp is pretty much just like baby bro Brock Bowers. I mean, he was 5'2", 4.52 speed, 6'4", 224. So he was a little bit lighter than Bowers coming in, but he's had 2 years in Jordan's strength program. He's probably up to 240. I was impressed with his recruiting film. Just legit route running, legit go up and get the ball ability. I mean, I was really high on him last year. I grabbed some shares. He's going to be out there in 2 tight end sets. And there was reports from the scrimmage where they actually had Bowers, Delp, and Lawson Lucky all split out wide, just like this monstrous, line of oversized receivers. That's got to be intimidating if you're an opposing defense. Lawson Lucky was the leading receiver for the second team in their last scrimmage. He was widely wide differences in his ranking as a recruit, but now I just looked and 247 Sports had him as like tight end 6 before. They got him at tight end 2 in this class now. So they've caught up, I guess. But, you know, he's 6'3", 240. It's just been hype since he stepped on the field. Just touchdown in the spring game. And, you know, he's going to get on the field this year. And, you know, is probably just the next one in line. Pierce Spurlin is the other tight end there, whose kind of ranking has swapped now. He was like the tight end 2 or 3 in the class. Now they have him at tight end 7. He's 6'7", 230. But look, man, he's fluid in his film in high school. Like, he looks good. And anytime you hear the camp, you know, the camp reporters talk about tight ends, they say, Lucky's looks great, but Spurlin looks great too. They never omit mentioning him. But he got hurt. He got hurt early. He broke his collarbone in the spring. So we just heard less about him. But I would be surprised if Spurlin isn't a good tight end and likely has Devy potential as well. They just develop these guys. But he may be the more Darnell Washington of the pair at this rate, just in terms of like his size comp and, you know, if Lucky's going to be the receiving weapon, Spurlin's probably going to get held in line a little bit more. That's it. That's what I got in Georgia. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Wow, you're super high on Delp, huh?
I am so high on Delp. Yeah, I think Delp's definitely next man up, and definitely going to have similar production to Bowers.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really get it, honestly. I'd probably, well, I don't know. Yeah, he's probably got more. I'm just thinking in terms of value. He's probably got more value right now than Conyers. And Conyers is like my next after JT that I care about for like a veteran player. So, yeah, I don't really hate this at all.
I keep wanting to move Lawson Lucky even higher, though.
I think you should.
Can't decide where to stop.
Above Fedone, at least, I think. I just don't trust Fedone to stay healthy. Again, I'm like legitimately worried.
I like him a lot if he's healthy, though.
Yeah, could be. Just he's like, I feel like you start your career that way and you just have, it's not like impossible to overcome it, but you've got like this additional big mound to overcome that like other kids coming in with the same pedigree now as freshmen don't, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, I think this is all pretty legit. I mean, Beck. Yeah. I really can't complain about too much. I already complained about Roger Robinson, but I get where you're coming from. I didn't know he was that fast. I probably would have made more of an effort to get Robinson shares in supplementals. I was aware of that.
He's been my favorite, like round 2, late round 1 pick. Like him and Cam Seldon, who we'll talk about a little later. They're very similar players. But yeah, love that type of running back. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to Florida. Let's do Florida. God,
close it out with Tennessee. Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah.
Hold it off to the end to get your glow about you right before you hang up.
Yeah. Oh, I have some glow about me right here, too. Florida is like quite possibly the worst they've been in like 30 years. So love that. Hate Florida.
Relishing that. Yeah.
Yes. They deserve this. Billy Napier, I don't think was a good hire ever. And I don't think he's going to last. He seems to be recruiting at a high level right now. I think for 2024 and 24/7, they're ranked like the number 4th overall class. But I think they're going to struggle a lot on the field this year, and they're going to lose some guys, as my guess. And a lot of that comes down to the decisions they made at quarterback in the transfer portal. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, number 4 overall pick in the NFL draft. Not much left on the roster after him. I mean, like Jack Miller, the former Ohio State backup, was there, but like nobody you really want to start. So they bring in Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. Graham Mertz has a career completion percentage of 59.2%. Last season, he threw for just 2,125 yards with 19 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Wisconsin was not a place where quarterbacks developed in the past. Mertz definitely never developed. He was semi-interesting as a recruit, if I remember correctly, but just never got better at Wisconsin. And I think it's like pure coaching malpractice for a program of Florida's caliber to need a quarterback and get Mertz out of the portal. Especially like we all know like the under the table deals happen, especially when like Grayson McCall or like Michael Pratt could have ended up at Florida, even though they never like officially entered the portal. And all the guys who were actually in the portal, like Devin Leary. Like Kentucky should not beat Florida for a quarterback recruit. So yeah, not interested in this passing game at all with Graham Mertz at quarterback. But the running game does feature one back that is pretty dang good, and that is Travis Etienne's younger brother, Trevor Etienne. He is a 5'9", 213 running back who, as a true freshman last year, put up 118 carries for 719 yards and 6 touchdowns, adding 9 receptions for 66 receiving yards. He was great with the ball in his hands. I mean, he had 3.87 yards after contact per attempt, just like made people miss and kept going down the field. He's a guy who's very fast, pretty agile as well. I think he's a very good running back. I mean, he already has requisite size at 5'9", 213. He definitely seems like a future NFL player, and possibly a very good one at that. And then they also have one other running back on the roster who I think will mix in with ETN, probably be a 1A, 1B situation. That is Montrell Johnson. Montrell Johnson is 5'11", 217. He took over at Louisiana with Billy Napier as his head coach in 2020. Put up like 800 yards as a true freshman at Louisiana. Moved to Florida with Billy Napier in 2021. Last season, he had 156 rushing attempts for 841 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, 12 receptions for 58 receiving yards. I think Montrell Johnson is a above average college running back. I don't see an elite trait that puts him in the NFL. I do think he'll be drafted. I don't think he'll be drafted highly. I don't think he's a special running back, but I do think he is a good running back. So expect those two to both have, I think, pretty similar seasons to last year. Split the running back output about 50-50 and probably account for about 800 to 900 rushing yards each. And then at wide receiver, this was a team that didn't really feature the passing game last year. Anthony Richardson completed just 176 passes last year, so not a lot of pie to go around. But the biggest piece of that pie went to Ricky Pearsall, who broke out for Arizona State back in 2021 as a junior with 48 receptions for 580 yards and 4 touchdowns. Moved on to Florida after that season and put up last season 33 receptions for 661 yards and 5 touchdowns. Added 8 carries for 133 yards and a touchdown as well. He's a 6'1" slot receiver. I actually like Ricky Pearsall a little bit. He's very he has all the skills that you would want a prototypical slot wide receiver to have. I mean, great burst, makes good cuts, runs his routes well, and he's got speed. I mean, last season with Anthony Richardson, he had an average depth of target of 17 yards. He was targeted downfield. Only had 1 drop last year. The issue, though, is that he took 3 seasons at Arizona State to break out. He's a 5th-year senior now. I think he's an interesting player. I think he'd have to have a very good season to be like truly NFL draft relevant. But I think once he gets to the NFL, he's a guy who will stick on a roster, a guy who will move the chains in the NFL. So
I'm not sure if he's an NFL starter.
No, I'm not sure he's a starter, but I don't think he gets cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Practice squad guy.
Yeah, more than that, maybe. I mean, yeah, he's better than the guy like Racy McMath or something.
Yeah. I'd say usually if you're that like wide receiver 5, you're also a useful part of the special teams, right? Or whatever, something else you're doing. Your return man or your special teams guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe who's to say he can't tackle? I don't know. Maybe
he's fast enough to get down the field. I mean,
yeah, that helps.
Yeah. And then they also have a returning sophomore, Caleb Douglas. He was just a 3-star in last year's class, but he's been getting rave reviews in this offseason. And he actually had a decent stat line last year as a true freshman, 10 receptions, 175 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 1.55 yards per route run. He's a 6'3", 202, decently athletic, expected to start as the wide receiver 2 to begin the season. I think he could be interesting. He's definitely a guy that I'm going to keep an eye on if he really starts to break out. And then they bring in a trio of good wide receiver recruits. I'll just go by 24/7's ranking of them. Eugene Wilson was the highest rated. He was the athlete ranked 16th. He is a 5'11", 165 wide receiver. So basically a slot guy at that size, obviously. And he's a guy who actually was a 5-star on three's recruiting rankings, despite being a 4-star everywhere else. I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, there were some guys who were very high on Eugene Wilson for some reason. I think Eugene Wilson turns into a good college wide receiver. I don't see him being a good NFL wide receiver. I mean, he's 5'11", 165, and his frame looks like it's decently filled out. I don't see him adding more weight.
He can deadlift like 600 pounds. He's literally the same.
So why does he not weigh more than 165?
I don't know, but he's like literally the same profile as like Rondale Moore, where he's just a complete freak, but he can run routes, and he runs routes smooth and downfield. So I'm kind of high on him, despite his physical like size limitations. I just think he's got like really special ability at that side. So yeah, it's tough to bet on a little guy like that to make the NFL, but God, I mean, I don't know, a combination of film, like raw athleticism, for me, I'm probably going to rank him more highly than you would. So,
yeah, I mean, I did like him in C2C drafts. I just wasn't sure that he would go to the NFL. He does have I do think he does have a quick first step. He's very agile with the ball in his hands, does well in the open field, and runs good routes, like you said. So definitely an interesting player there. Aiden Mazzell was the second highest rated wide receiver in this class on 247. He was the wide receiver 26. He has 100-meter track time in the 10.6s, which is pretty fast. And he's kind of just pretty fast. I didn't come away super impressed. I know a lot of other people didn't. Over half of his high school routes were goes and screens. So not a very established route tree for Aiden Mazzell. I think he has a lot of work to do before he can really get on the field, which isn't great for the wide receiver position, in my opinion. But he is decently fast, so that's kind of interesting. And then Aidan. And then Andy Jean is the last wide receiver, Tuzizia. He was the wide receiver 58 on 247, and he's been the guy who's been getting rave reviews out of Florida's camp. I believe he was an early enrollee and was there for the spring. He's 6'1", 180, and an absolute burner. He's pretty advanced technically for his like size. He's very bulked up at 6 foot. He's like very bulked up, and he like can get bigger. I think he makes good cuts, tracks the ball well over his shoulder. I think Andy Jean will see significant snaps for Florida this year, and I think I like him more than Mazzell for sure. But yeah. And then at tight end, I mean, Keon Zipperer is there. He's a guy that many people have had some expectations for, but he suffered a major knee injury during spring practice, will likely miss the entire season. So that brings up Arliss Boardingham, who is a highly rated recruit last year, I believe a high 4-star. He's 6'3", 245, and an absolute athlete. He has really good speed, really good burst. He'll definitely give some linebackers some trouble in the seam. He reminds me a lot of a guy like Tommy Tremble, who's kind of like a souped-up slot. Not quite, big enough at 6'3", but like I think he'll make some plays. I think he's interesting, but I do worry about him moving to the NFL a little bit. So, you got anything on Florida yourself?
Just really big fan of Eugene Wilson. Really, he was one of my favorite. Like after the top tier guys, he was one of my favorite wide receivers in the class. I know it's tough to bet on the size, but if there's a small guy profile I'm going to bet on, it's him. Also, you forgot to rank Dylan Bell from Georgia, so I threw him in there kind of with like the mid-tier freshman for Devy.
I'm not really going to argue with you about Wilson. The one thing I did do is I moved Shelton Sampson ahead of him, just because I feel like Sampson's a better. I have him ranked much higher as a freshman.
I didn't love Sampson's film, but it could happen, So I think I have 0 shares of Shelton. Every time I turned on the film, I was just like, he's good, but I don't know. I liked Cordell a lot more than I liked Sampson, and they were kind of in the same range.
No, me too. I think there's a tier break after Russell.
Yeah. I don't know what to do with those guys for CFF. I mean, they probably should rank some of them like somewhere on here, but
yeah, I think Pearsall is going to be the wide receiver one.
Pearsall or one of the Ole Miss guys. Like, who do you know what I mean? I think I'd rather have both the Ole Miss quarterback wide receivers than Pearsall. Maybe not though, because they could suck.
No, I think that he's in like this Billy Kemp, Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, it's kind of
range.
Yeah,
because like both those guys are like in very similar situations where they're gonna be the wide receiver one, but like they're both on like offenses that aren't great. So I think all 3 of those Pearsall, not Mazzell.
Yeah, I just copy and paste.
So yeah.
He had some nice underlying metrics last year too. He had 2.41 yards per route run with an ADOT of 17. That's pretty good. 163 yards YAC downfield. Played mostly out of the slot. Did you know that?
Yeah. He's a slot guy. Like he's a route runner from the slot. He's a technician type guy.
So yeah, I don't hate it. I don't think there's anyone else here we have to rank. Trevor Etienne. You bumped him down a little bit.
No, I didn't move him.
Oh, that's where I put him. Do you like where I put him? For CFF, I have him between Devontae Barnes and Trayshawn Ward, behind Lloyd, behind McClellan, behind TJ Harden. You said you think he goes for 800 yards. I have a hard time putting him higher than that,
No, I definitely don't think he's higher.
Yeah. I could see him being behind Joquavius, behind Jaden Ott. I got hung up at Dijun Edwards. I actually moved him down a little bit. And I also got hung up of like Scatterbo and Johnson because Scatterbo is going to catch passes. Bucky Irving's going to go for 1,000 yards, right? So I mean, frankly, he should probably be behind Irving for CFF.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know. Irving's going to go for 1,000 all-purpose at least.
Yeah, I think ETN could go for 1,000 all-purpose too.
Yeah, that's fine then. Then leave him on your list.
I do think that is. Yeah. No, I like him there. I just think I did rank Montrell not that far behind him. I think they're going to have very similar outputs.
Yeah.
So
that's fair. And then for Devy, I mean, I'm pretty high on ETN at this point. How about you?
I have him lower than that, but
how much lower? Ahead of Riscano?
Yeah, right there actually, behind Allen, ahead of Riscano.
I'm fine with that.
That's where I have him.
I'm fine with that. I'd rather have, like, if you were going to offer me Ruben Owens or Trevor Etienne right now, I'm definitely taking Etienne over Ruben Owens. I could see, depending on my needs, taking Corum higher. Lloyd. Yeah. I don't know. I don't care that much about it. All right.
Yeah. I think part of it for me, it's not necessarily Owens that I'm higher on. It's like Lloyd and Allen that I like more than ETN. But
yeah, I was gonna say Allen. I think is pretty damn good. But so is ETN. Allen's bigger. Yeah. But like, what's Allen gonna run? You know what I mean? ETN's probably gonna run a 4.4. Allen's probably gonna run a 4.58. Okay, I get to do a team. Scroll. Great. I get to talk about the ever exciting Vanderbilt 5-7
Commodores.
Last year. The Commodores. So 5-7 last year. I don't really see how they like significantly improve on that. I didn't like go through their schedule looking for wins, but I mean, they're probably not going to win a lot of SEC games, right? Maybe they take home like an upset at home, but
I don't think they're going to be winning more games. I kind of think Hawaii beats them week 0, which would not be good for them.
That'd be demoralizing for sure. I don't know though. They got so AJ Swan apparently has been playing well in the offseason. If he is a competent college quarterback, which, true freshman, 10-2 touchdown interception ratio, 7 adjusted yards per attempt, which it's not a great Anya, but it's not horrible. If he takes some steps forward, I mean, I think Will Shepherd, the senior wide receiver, is a legitimate weapon, at least at a college level, and with some NFL upside for sure. If guys like A.T. Perry can get drafted, why not Shepherd,
Yeah.
So, I think they got some weapons there. I think they can compete for sure. I mean, the question's really, like, how's their line? How's the trenches stuff? But, yeah, I mean, I think they can take down Hawaii, but we'll see. They looked pretty inept at some times last year. But, again, a couple of nice pieces. So, Swan,
their SEC schedule's rough. They get Ole Miss and actually it's not that bad. They get Ole Miss and Auburn for the West, but they play Wake Forest for one of their out of conference games, and I think that's an obvious loss. So yeah, I do struggle to see them getting 5 wins again.
Yeah. So, anyways, probably not a team you're going to be betting on a lot of overs when they're on the field, but I do like Shepherd. I mean, Shepherd broke out early. He was a sophomore breakout, 2.5 yards per out run against zone last year. I mean, those are good numbers. He's 6'3", he's 198. He's played in offenses that haven't been able to really produce at a prolific level, but he's the kind of guy where if you dropped him on some other teams, he'd be an 1,100-yard receiver like this year. A lot of teams, other P5 teams, not just like tearing down. I think he's a good receiver. If you put him in the Pac-12, you don't think he can go for 1,000 yards? He went for It was like 776 last year, playing against the SEC with a combination of
If
God,
that
Mike.
Pac-12 team has the same wide receivers that Vandy has, sure. But I think most Pac-12 teams have better wide receivers than Will Shepherd.
I don't know. I think he'd start. He'd start for Washington State.
Yeah, he'd start. I think DT Sheffield's better though.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know. Sometimes, Kyle, I just don't know about you. Anyways, I think he's got like late round.
Hey,
potential.
DT Sheffield got comped to Tyreek Hill yesterday.
Oh, the old Tyreek comp. We don't ever see that.
Little guy who's fast.
Anyway, I'm hoping that Swan is better and Shepard can improve on his 776 yards from last year. But that, could be a hope in vain. It all rides on the shoulders of a 19-year-old named Swan, right? A couple of the pieces that are interesting there. Yeah, he's tough.
Yeah.
He thought. Jaden McGowan, another interesting name for me there, 5'8", 180. He was one of the top-rated freshmen last year and also one of the top freshmen in metrics I like yards per out run. Although really was just a zone killer. He was like legitimately bad versus man, which, again, he's 5'8", 180, and he ain't Tyreek Hill. So most of these guys are not, boxing out and dominating at the catch point. And he's a young kid, so maybe he gets some more route running finesse and can begin to produce against man, but didn't get it done last year. Still, he's an interesting guy. He's the guy I like to throw him at roster late. See, maybe he builds on that and turns into a thing. You never know. 5'8's tough for Devy though, but gosh, even if he could turn into a useful CF, that's nice. And then it sounds like Quincy Skinner is actually the wide receiver 2 there if he's healthy. I got nothing on Skinner. 6'2", 205. He's a wide receiver in the SEC. They had a freshman who got name dropped quite a bit by players and by beats. His name's London Humphreys. He's a true freshman at 6'3", 186. He was literally listed like in the same breath with Shepard. Like, oh, we got these guys. London, Shepard, making plays downfield. So it's interesting. Maybe he's a thing. Definitely. You gonna say something?
Yeah, we're all very dismissive of Vanderbilt because of their pedigree on the football field. It's very obvious. They've never been good. But what they've done over the past 10 years in terms of recruiting is actually very impressive. They've really come to become this team that just finds guys who are athletic, finds guys who are going to climb the recruiting rankings before they climb the recruiting rankings. Like they're offering guys as sophomores, like Kamorian Pimpton, I believe was offered by Vandy as like a freshman or a sophomore, like his first P5 offer. Like their recruiting department finds guys. Most of those guys end up getting found out by everybody else and then don't end up going to Vandy, but their recruiting department is very good. And it's starting to show for them with guys like Shepard and McGowan, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And, London Humphreys might be the next in line. Obviously, he's a guy that has some Devy potential if he can do it, just, in terms of being a little bit bigger build and, maybe having a little bit of speed at size. So there's been some hype in the running back room. True freshman Cedric Alexander, 5'9", 200, is likely to be the starter. He's a guy that was good in high school. It's been good, through spring, through fall. He's probably got the job. If it's not him, it is Chase Gillespie, who's a redshirt freshman last year.
It's 100% Alexander.
Yeah, probably. There's a couple people that mentioned it, like, oh, Chase or Cedric. So I don't know.
No, it's Cedric. I mean, the running back coach has basically said it. So
yeah. And, Cedric, I don't know. He's fast enough, right? He's like a mid-11s, 100-yard dash that he ran. So that's fast enough. That's like a 4.5. Could be a thing. Always a long shot to project these lower ranked guys to the NFL, but I'd throw him on my Devy list somewhere for sure. Just
the thing is, it's just so impressive to win the starting running back job at any SEC school before a single snap is played as a freshman.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm old enough to remember the Gabe Ervin hype of 2022. You know what I mean? Or 2021,
it's back.
Whatever it was.
There's Gabe Ervin hype of 2023.
I know. I'm just saying, like, I'd take it all with a grain of salt. But yes, it is impressive. Look, if he's a starter, worst case scenario, you get a volume guy for 4 years in college football. I mean, that can be a league winner, I mean, Vanderbilt has, for all their faults, produced some NFL players and certainly produced some producers for CFF, particularly a running back. So could definitely be a thing. I'm interested in him. I grabbed a lot of shares late in the last few supplementals I did after I'd kind of caught on to his name. And again, you were talking about Blake before the show. I actually think I caught on to Alexander from Blake, hyping him up. So
yeah, Blake Hampton and I have talked quite a bit about Cedric Alexander this offseason. So
well, then let it be. Tight end, I couldn't find anyone to talk about. So I don't know, unless you know something I don't. I don't think there's a tight end that's rosterable on Vanderbilt. Interestingly enough, the page I'm looking at on our draft board has not changed at all.
Oh, hit refresh.
No, they're all down. They're all down there. I had to do some scrolling.
Yeah. You think any of them should be higher than where they are?
No, I mean, I think I'd be a little higher on Shepard for CFF, but some guys in there, Pickney, Rucker, I think are pretty solid. I think maybe you'll love it a little bit too high.
Yeah, that's probably true. I put
problem
him high
there.
because I thought you would put him high. So.
Yeah, I do the same thing, but I love it more for Devy than I do for CFF. I just think we both tried to move him at the same time. I think I broke it. We finally did it. We finally broke it.
Oh, yeah. This page is slowing down. To speed up your browser, stop this page.
We did it. Finally broke it.
Refresh. Okay.
Did you make it refresh?
Yeah. And Dominic Lovett disappeared.
Nice. Good stuff. Good stuff, guys. I knew that was bound to happen sooner or later with multiple people being in sheets at once. Well, I will let you fix that. Clearly, too many cooks in the kitchen is not a good thing with sheets, we've found. So, cool. I didn't really have anything else to say about Vandy. I mean, Cedric, yeah, it looks great for both. You fixed Lovett, that looks better. All right, rolling on. Who you got now?
Missouri.
Missouri.
Mizzou, the worst culture fit in the SEC. There's no reason they should be here. Although, props to Mizzou. They're doing well in recruiting right now. They just added the number 1 recruit in the nation to the recruiting class for 2024. And they put guys bags. Yeah. They've put guys in the NFL too. They're just not actually in the Southeast, so get them out of the SEC. But on offense, most importantly for us, they bring in a new offensive coordinator, Kirby Moore. Kirby Moore has a special place in my heart because he is Kellen Moore's younger brother, and Kellen Moore is my favorite college football player of all time. Kirby Moore played wide receiver at Boise State, along with Kellen, where he was when Kellen was quarterback. Obviously, Kellen Moore now is the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers, previously of the Cowboys. So both these guys moving up in the coaching world quite quickly, both in their late 20s, I believe. They're so both OCs at big jobs now. Kirby Moore is a Kalen DeBoer disciple. He's been at Fresno State since 2017. He began as a wide receiver coach in 2017 to 2019, got promoted to pass game coordinator from 2020 to 2021. And then when DeBoer left for Washington and Jeff Tedford took over as head coach, Kirby Moore was then promoted to offensive coordinator for last season, where Fresno State continued to see success despite Jake Haener moving on to the NFL. I think Kirby Moore, in comparison to Drinkwitz's offense of last year, will have a very similar run-pass mix, but I think Kirby Moore will bring a more explosive, more creative passing concept to Mizzou, and I think they'll push the ball down the field more. Last season had a lot of horizontal passing game. I think they'll play a little more vertical, but they'll still have plenty of opportunity for a running back to take over, and that running back will still probably be a workhorse. There's nothing to suggest that Kirby likes a committee, and Drinkwitz definitely doesn't as well. So I think it's fair to expect a running back in the top 20, 25-ish, and wide receiver could have a guy. I mean, Kirby Moore coached Jalen Cropper and Nico Remigio at Fresno State, who were both pretty successful for CFF. So now that you know about that, we'll move on to the names of the actual players who will be playing. And surprisingly, we don't actually even know for sure which players are playing at the quarterback position. I think they play in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they still have not named a starting quarterback. Brady Cook.
Seems disadvantageous.
Brady Cook is the returning starter from last year and definitely seems to be the favorite. I think most people are saying like a 70 to 80% chance it's Brady Cook. He's competing with redshirt freshman Sam Horn, who was a high 4-star in last year's class, and the transfer from Miami, Jake Garcia, who I believe was a 4-star in his own right back in 2020, 2019-ish. But I am assuming Brady Cook will once again be the starter. He'll be a redshirt junior going into this season. Last year, he had a 64.2% completion percentage, 2,748 yards, and then just 14 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. He didn't push the ball downfield, 8.5 average depth of target. But as I mentioned, I do think that has a lot to do with the scheme of Eli Drinkwitz. I think that can be improved upon going into this year. And then the interesting thing I didn't actually know about Brady Cook is he is a plus runner of the football. He had 86 carries for 720 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. I did not realize that. But that definitely adds a layer to his game that makes him semi-interesting for CFF. I mean, any guy who's getting over 700 rushing yards, that's worth I want to say, I'm doing the math in my head, I think that's worth like 5 points a game, if not more than that. Right?
Whoa, don't come at me with all this math. Yeah, something like that for sure. It's good. It's good. Hey, it's good for fantasy football. So Brady Cook's one of those guys that any time I needed a quarterback in supplementals, I kept looking at him, reading the Missouri camp reports, reading the spring scrimmage, but I just wasn't sure he was going to like keep the job in the spring. So if he does, I think he's interesting for sure. He was adequate as a passer and great as a runner. So, yeah. I mean, God, he's a guy that like we could be looking at the end of this year being like, wow, why did no one draft him? You know?
Mm-hmm. Especially in an offense that we think can do better. I mean, Jake Haener was very efficient moving the ball down the field in this offense. I mean, Haener's probably a better passer than Cook, but who did they have last year? Was it still Haener? Or
at Fresno?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Haener just got drafted.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Brady Cook's the favorite. I think he's semi-interesting, like we mentioned. I don't really see him as a Devy asset, but CFF, I could see it. And then they haven't settled the quarterback position, but don't worry, They also have not named a starting running back, just in case you were worried about that. But I do think this is a more favorable environment to run the football. They had a lot of trouble last year at the offensive line, but they've added bulk on the O-line. They've gotten 2 4-star offensive tackle transfers. Both seem to be doing well in camp, so I think they'll be improved in the hole opening ability. And I think that's a big deal for one of these guys because Cody Schrader is the name that I would expect to be the RB1 in this offense. He's going into his 6th year of college football. He played 4 years at Truman State and then was a walk-on transfer to Mizzou last year, and then won the starting job and gained a scholarship halfway through the season. So quite the story for Cody Schrader, but not a super interesting running back. He's the kind of guy who just kind of gets what's blocked. So if that blocking is better, I think that's a big deal for Cody Schrader. Last season, he had 170 rush attempts for 746 yards and 9 touchdowns, along with 18 receptions for 134 yards. The coaching staff back in spring said he was a guy who looks like a 1,000-yard rusher. I could see that happening, but I could also see it not happening. The issue is they haven't really they didn't bring in anybody to compete with him. So I think Cody Schrader, as a guy who's, just a solid north-south runner, not an explosive guy, will be the RB1 and will turn every carry into 5 yards, 4 or 5 yards. So I do think he will be all right for CFF. And then behind him is Nathaniel Pete. Nathaniel Pete is also going to be a 5th-year senior this year. His first 3 seasons came at Stanford before he transferred to Mizzou last year. Last year, he had 101 carries for 443 yards and 2 touchdowns. 88 of those carries were in the first 7 games. He had a bit of a fumble issue. There was a fumble against, I believe, Vanderbilt that lost them the game. And then he basically got benched. He had like 13 more carries for the rest of the season. But apparently he seems to be back in the good graces of the coaching staff. He's quite possibly the polar opposite of Cody Schrader in the fact that he either gains a ton of yards or no yards at all. 50% of his career yardage comes on runs over 15 yards. So a breakaway runner who either gets out or just gets tackled behind the line. So quite the interesting combo of running backs Missouri has. And then also in the running back room, they have Tavoris Jones. Tavoris Jones was a 4-star prospect in last year's class. He did basically nothing last year. I think he had 5 carries as a true freshman, but he seems to reportedly be the running back 3 and competing for some real work this year. I don't think he's very specifically good, but he is on the team. And then the Devy asset on this Missouri team that people will actually care about, I actually care about, Luther Burden. Last year, he was the consensus wide receiver 1. He was 24/7's wide receiver 2, but he's just like an athletic stud. There are some things that he needs to refine, but in terms of everything that you can't coach, it's there. He's 5'11", 208, has plus athleticism, obviously has the size, makes plays with the ball in his hands. I mean, he has shown that he's an elite return man. He's was used in the offense in basically any way possible to get him the ball, screens, end arounds, all kinds of stuff. He's a guy who you watch the tape and it looks like his ADOT is going to be like -1, but his ADOT was actually 9.7 last year, which still isn't quite where you want it to be. You want to see like 10, 12 for an NFL wide receiver, but I think the ADOT of the entire offense improves. So I think Luther Burden's average depth of target improves. Last season, 46 receptions, 398 yards, 6 touchdowns. The two red flags I have for Luther Burden, to throw water on my own fire because I like Burden quite a lot. He was just 3 for 12 on contested catch opportunities last year. Not great for a guy you think is kind of like an alpha type wide receiver. And then he was outproduced by a guy that we talked about earlier, Dominic Lovett, who transferred to Georgia, who was also a true freshman last year at Missouri. Lovett outproduced him. How big of a red flag do you think that is?
I think Lovett's a good wide receiver. Are you sure Lovett was a true freshman? I think he might have been a redshirt. So redshirt freshman, but
He is class of 2020.
I think he's draft eligible this year.
Class of 2021. Yeah, you're right. Redshirt freshman.
Yeah. Nonetheless, it wasn't like he got outproduced a little bit. Like Lovett was good last year, and Burden was like, okay. I don't know. So
I mean,
struggle.
Burden had what would be a very impressive freshman season for anyone who was not the wide receiver one in the class.
If you take away the expectations on him,
yeah,
yes. It's almost he's a victim of the own hype, right? Because if he was like random 4-star and put up 400 yards, I'd be like, oh yeah, like sweet, let's go get this guy. But just and I don't know. Sometimes I'm wary of guys who like are these high level athletes and haven't like they need to develop the other skills, right, to make it at the next level. And he didn't really show us that he did that last year. Most of his production was like on like screens, like short passes. You didn't see him like winning contested balls downfield, right? Like that, you saw Lovett winning contested balls downfield. Lovett was awesome in contested opportunities. So,
but you did see Burden get the ball in his hands and just make plays.
And just like run dudes over, but like that does not an NFL wide receiver make, right? Like he needs to figure out some other stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Like
otherwise
you're like Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, right? Like you're an athlete and like that's what you are. You know what I mean? I don't know. What do you think? Like I don't know what to do with him. We'll find out a lot this year because they're going to throw the ball, and they ain't throwing the ball to the other guys on that roster very much.
Yeah.
And, I think you'll know by midseason this year, like if you're in a lot of trouble with your Burden backs.
Yeah, right? And another offseason with in the SEC getting coached by, coaches who know their stuff. I think Kirby Moore can help unlock him a little bit. So and apparently he's moving to the slot. I mean, Lovett was obviously the slot last year. Burden seems to be moving to the slot this year. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, he definitely has the athleticism to work the seams, but
yeah, if you want him to be like a top 10 NFL draft pick, he's got to be able to win on the outside, right?
Yeah,
or he's got to be Kyle Pitts. Like those are your two. Kyle Pitts win on the outside. Yeah, for Christ's sake, just otherwise he's like Treylon Burks, right? If he can figure it out in the slot and he has some athleticism, like he's Treylon Burks, right? Which is still fine. That was a round 1 wide receiver. It's a guy that still has, NFL dynasty potential despite a okay rookie season. So it's not a bad thing to be per se, but it's not Jamar Chase. And that's kind of like what you're hoping for with the Burden pick, right? Because the athleticism was on the level.
Like JSN played 83% of his snaps in the slot.
Wildly different players. Doesn't even make sense to compare them. You know what I mean? JSN is like the anti-Luther Burden. And Luther Burden's bigger, faster, stronger. You want that profile to be able to win downfield, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know.
Plus JSN.
Maybe like Elijah Moore.
All right. So where did you like where I put him? I just feel like at this point,
I have him higher.
I could put him ahead of Tet because I don't think Tet's a crazy athlete. I could put him ahead of Neighbors, but I don't know. Are you drafting him ahead of Brown at this point? I think the upside argument is for me to put him there, but like I'm personally risk averse because I still think like Malik Neighbors is going to be a really good receiver in the NFL. I think that's going to be a really good receiver in the NFL. Burden could be better than those guys, or he could literally like whiff and be like a 600-yard receiver this year in CFF and be like a day 3 draft pick. You know what I mean? He could be Kayshon Boutte, right? Like he just could happen every year. So it's a little bit scary for me. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm so scared. I guess it's because I watched a lot of film of his, like him and Lovett, trying to figure out is Lovett good? Like, should I be, chasing Lovett, and like, should I be trying to buy low on Burden? And I just really didn't see much from Burden on the film last year. But whatever. He's a young kid. He's got time, but he's got to figure it out this year. He's got to.
He's also got a roster with nothing on it. I mean, with Lovett gone, like he has to do it, or else nobody else is.
If he doesn't get like 8 receptions week 1, I'm gonna shit. I'm gonna be sending so many trade offers, like Burden for Innis and the 3rd round pick. Like,
hey, they probably play an absolute nobody. He might not even play. You never know.
Brady Cook. I thought behind Taylon Green was a pretty good spot for him. I think Taylon Green's a pretty good CFF asset. This isn't even a knock on Brady Cook. I just think there's so many quarterbacks with like upside for CFF.
Oh yeah, I definitely think Green's better.
But like Connor Wegman isn't. I don't know why Wegman's as high as he is. Seth Hennigan should be ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, we want to see him take a step, right? If he takes a step, then he's there.
So Cody Schrader, I wasn't sure if we should put him above that group we were just talking about or behind. I put him between Joe Marks and Katron Allen. Also, Damian Martinez is too low because you hate him irrationally. He's good.
I could see Schrader ending up higher if like Pete's not really a thing, but I kind of think Pete is a thing. It's tough to tell.
Yeah,
Missouri plays South Dakota week 1, by the way, so I doubt Burden will get to 8 receptions.
Burden better have 150 yards on those 4 catches.
On 4 catches, yeah.
I mean, that's realistic stat line for that game. You're just running dudes over that have no business being on the same field as him. Yes, I mean, like Schrader could be a 1,200-yard guy, or he could be freaking like not
800 again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move on. Unless you got more Missouri tips.
Yeah, we'll real quick talk about the rest of the wide receiver room. There are other guys on the roster. Theo Weezy transfers in from Oklahoma. The dream is dead, but he is likely the best jump ball threat on the Missouri roster. He's like 6'3", so really the only guy who's like that tall on the team. He seems to have taken the starting job. He's got good reviews from like the defensive players. Like every time you ask the defensive players, like, hey, who's making plays on the offense? It's Theo Weezy. So I think Theo Weezy could be something this year. Mookie Cooper is also on the team. He was recruited by Ohio State out of high school, transferred to Mizzou after not being able to latch on at OSU. He's 5'8", but he has 90th percentile speed. So, I mean, you basically have like this wide receiver core with like 3 very different types. You have like the slot, super athletic guy, the tall guy, and then the really fast guy. So like that's kind of what most teams want to do these days. So I think it's going to work out for Missouri. Cooper had 26 receptions for 298 yards last year. That'll probably go up. I think his ADOT goes way up. His ADOT was just 7.7 yards last year. I do think he sees more targets down the field. To benefit to his speed. And then that's about it. The tight ends, pretty much useless at Mizzou. So
I ranked Theo Weezy right in that kind of Pearsall range because
I think that's too high.
You put him a little lower?
Yeah.
I mean, Hill range?
Yeah, I think Kemp and Johnson are like 800-yard receivers.
Yeah, I don't think that's easy. I think he's 600. So
yeah,
but I mean, gosh, there's a world where he's.
I like there.
No one else I need to rank, right?
Sure.
Mookie Cooper. I don't know. I don't want to rank Cooper. He could do things, but I honestly, there's a world where if Burden isn't good, they put Cooper in the slot and put Burden outside playing off ball at Z. It could happen. But all right. So to wrap up my teams, we are gonna talk about South Carolina, the Gamecocks, and all of their exciting pieces here. It's still Shane Beamer as the head coach. He's been there for a couple of years. They do have a new offensive coordinator, Dowell Logans.
Loggins? I think it's Loggins.
Loggins. It just looks like Loggins. So Dowell Loggins. So Loggins was a QB coach under Gase. He called plays for the last couple of games where Gase got fired when the Jets higher ups made Gase quit calling plays. And if I recall correctly, it was an improvement. So,
Not hard.
Not hard, right? But I mean, so the kid might have some skills.
Speaking of improvements that aren't hard, improving from the most recent South Carolina play calling, going to be quite easy. They were not very good at being creative last season.
Yeah, and reading this, there were players saying that the playbook was too hard last year, basically, and that they were excited about the simpler concepts that Loggins was going to put out there. So
interesting.
Yeah, he also coached under Pittman last year at Arkansas as the tight end coach, so maybe he brings some of that offense. They were pretty fun. I liked to hear that he plans to be fast, like a spread type team, and to, quote, get the balls in good players' hands, unquote. I would also like for you to call a lot of plays and give the ball to your good players. Mr. Dowell Loggins, please do it. So
good strategy.
Good strategy. You're going to talk about Spencer Rattler, obviously the QB1 from a couple of classes back, 5-star, has just not lived up to his hype. Has not really been able to get it done at a high level yet. Had flashes at Oklahoma, but was inconsistent. Last year, reined in some of the worst aspects of his play, I think, and and got it done at least like at an average college quarterback level. Threw for 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Still too many turnovers. 3.5 yards per attempt. So again, that's like a baseline college quarterback, right? That's like about as average as it gets for a starter. That's good enough to keep their job, but not good enough to move on to the next level. Probably who Rattler is at this point. Maybe a better play calling system helps him. We shall see. More exciting to talk about is Lenore Sellers. He is super fun. Last year, as a senior, he threw for 3,000 yards, 45 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Oh, yeah. And he ran for 1,337 yards and another 22 touchdowns. The kid accounted for 67 touchdowns himself. That is just stupid. That is dumb. That is wild. He's a legit freak athlete and can throw the ball. Obviously, all these kids are coming in, have some work to do in that part, but there are reasons to be very excited about Lenore Sellers. Sure, sometimes these guys don't work out. Sometimes they turn into Anthony Richardson, and it is well worth sinking your, 5th round supplemental pick in at a 10% chance at Anthony Richardson. That's a bet you should be taking in these things. I regret that I didn't take more shares of him early. I grabbed a couple copies in my last few drafts. Again, the percentage chance of him hitting is probably sub 50%, but gosh, if he hits, it's pretty fun. So definitely a guy I'm interested in. And, and reports so far have been decent. He was running the 3rd team offense, but, he's a true freshman. So wide receiver, they got some pieces. Mostly Antoine Juice Wells. would be the guy. He's a top 15 returner in terms of yards per route run, 2.48. And he had a rack god like 8.0 yak per reception. I mean, that's really good. So he's that like Debo mold. Is he the level athlete Debo is? We don't know. I don't know that. I can't find anything that seemed really telling about his athleticism at this point. But man, those are interesting numbers for sure. Went for 69, 941, and 6 last year. I think he's a Devy guy. He's getting mocked. Like all these guys that we don't know are locked in first round picks get mocked as like 90, pick 114, and they hover at that point through this whole time period. So that's where he is right now. I think he's like round 4 or better pick, as long as he builds on last year. I was a JUCO guy, so
he was actually at James Madison FCS, and then actually transferred to South Carolina the year that James Madison moved up to FBS.
That's funny. Yeah. So look, anyways, there's some cool stuff in his profile. He's an older breakout, whatever. I think the NFL will like him. They'll see that like, run after the catch profile and athleticism and like a lot.
No, I mean, he's an early breakout. I mean, he had 33, 603, and 6 as a freshman at James Madison.
I don't care about breakouts at lower levels personally. Do you?
Yeah. For guys that started at lower levels, yeah.
I don't care that much. But he produced immediately in getting into a P5 team. So that's to me. Immediately took the starting, the wide receiver 1 role. So that's
I mean, the thing about like it's like baked in. It's like comparing two things twice, because like guys who break out early at the FCS level transfer up earlier, and so like a guy like Tesla or somebody who didn't break out to like year 3 at the FCS or D2 level, like
you just
they move up as like 5th year seniors, but Wells moved up as a true junior. So
yeah, you just wanted to drop case law again. The only other guy I care about in the wide receiver room really at all is Nick Harbor. Man, they just went for the all freak team this year with their recruiting and won the freak wars. Nick Harbor, 6'5", 240, and has legitimate Olympic sprinting dreams. This is just not a profile that you see very often at all. I mean, it's like it's DK Metcalf-ish, but he could be more than DK Metcalf in terms of, freak ability. He's taller, right, and heavier. Mm-hmm. So, gosh, yeah. and has that same level of speed. So this is just wacky athleticism. It seemed like he's not going to start this year. They're saying sometimes he would get behind wide DBs and roast them, and other times he seemed to have a hard time getting into his routes, getting into his breaks. Look, you don't draft this guy, expecting he's going to be a year 1 producer for you. Hopefully he, pops the cherry, as it were, and catches a long touchdown, gets himself in the good set of data for Devy. But, you weren't drafting him to play him this year in CFF anyways. But he's super exciting Devy piece for sure. This is one of the interesting nuggets I dug up. At running back, it looks like South Carolina will be starting Dakarian Joyner. Dakarian Joyner has had a circuitous path to the RB1 position, having been recruited as a quarterback, moved to wide receiver, and now moved to running back. On the positive side, he seems to be thriving in the role. Is the best of the bunch at the running back. Reportedly, look, I like that he has snaps at quarterback. We've got a long history of quarterbacks converting to positions and being good, and using some of that ability to see the field and so on as an asset. I like that he has wide receiver snaps. Like, we know the kid can catch the ball well, right? Reportedly ran a 4.54, fast enough for Devy. And he's played great in camp. So you can't make too big of a guy, just like getting a job. But has the size, 227 pounds, has catching ability. He could be a guy that kind of comes out of nowhere and is a significant CFF asset, or maybe even hits Devy radar. In the games he was healthy last year, Marshawn Lloyd was really, really good. So if we project, to carry on to get that kind of work, obviously it's a new offense, but hopefully they still want to have a workhorse. Kid could be, a significant asset, and you literally never seen this guy get drafted. So he's probably free in pretty much every league right now. There's a guy named Mario Anderson that transferred in from a lower level, 5'9", 210. Looks like he's the running back 2 to start the season, as per the beats. And more exciting than Anderson for sure is true freshman DJ Braswell, or Dominic, as you might know him.
Dontavius,
that's right. Dontavius Braswell. And look, he's the future at the position for this team. He's a Division 2A track champ, running a 10.72 100 meter. I mean, that's real fast. And that was at 5'10", 200 pounds. That's big enough as a freshman to really put on the pounds and become workhorse, NFL size. He's got some skills. I like his tape. He looks fluid. Can do some stuff in the open field, caught a couple passes. Lots of things to like about Braswell.
Yeah, he was definitely got praise too.
Yeah.
In camp.
Yep.
I expect him to see the field as a freshman, and quite often, honestly.
Yeah, the way it was phrased, in the fall camp reports was Mario Anderson and DJ Braswell will also play behind a carry-on. So they did say them in the same breath. Looks like Mario Anderson's got more experience. Coaches care about that. But, yeah, Braswell is on the field this year. And I think there's not really much behind him on the depth chart either. So he could get a significant amount of work, which would be cool.
Is Juju McDowell still around too?
I don't know. They didn't say anything about him.
Oh, Montario Hardesty's a running back coach? Yikes.
I know nothing about him. Where do you know him from?
Oh, he used to be the running back coach of Tennessee. He was not very good.
Got it. So I think tight end is interesting at South Carolina too. And I feel like they did the same thing they did last year. They took 2 really high level portal tight ends and then just didn't play either one of them at all in a way that made us happy for CFF and for C2C. It was last year. It was Stogner, and then the kid that transferred to FSU this year,
Jaheim Bell.
Yeah, right, Jaheim Bell, who is we've been excited about. This year it's Trey Knox, who came over from Arkansas with the OC. He went 6 for 40 and a touchdown in the first half of their scrimmage. Rattler likes throwing it to him. I mean, Knox is definitely a CFF guy this year. He's undersized to be a Devy tight end. I don't think you got to even worry about that too much. He's like 6'5", 215, just way too small to even really be a tweener in the NFL. And I don't think he's got the skill set to be a boundary receiver. So probably not a Devy guy at all. But gosh, I mean, if you're going to go, put up 40 plus yards in every game as a tight end, that's a lot of fun. So, and it sounds like WKU transfer Joshua Simon might be the third in the pecking order there. It might well be Juice Wells, Trey Knox, Joshua Simon. Joshua Simon's kind of a tweener as well. He's a little bigger. He's 6'4", 238. But it kind of seems like either they're going to be twinning 12 personnel or putting one of those guys, in the slot at a traditional wide receiver position. So he had the third most targets in the fall scrimmage. So both of those guys, interesting for CFF. I don't think either one of them really has Devy value. I mean, I guess Simon could. He's of adequate size and fairly fast for the size, but I don't know. I wouldn't worry about ranking either of them for Devy, but both of them are guys that are now interesting to me at the college level. That's it. That's USC South. You got any
Cool.
thoughts here, Kyle?
Don't call him USC. That's my thought.
USC South.
No.
Yeah.
Scar. That's all they get.
I just said it to be a twit. I usually call them SC. That's what I call them.
Yeah.
All right. So we've waited a long time with bated breath to get to the real meat of the program tonight.
Yep. Time to stretch.
It's time to go. To rank all these guys way lower than you want me to.
I'll move them up. I'll wait till the show's over and move them up. All right. Tennessee, one of the best offenses in the country. I believe they were top 2 or 3 in yards, touchdowns, scoring everything last year. Josh Heupel seems to be the second coming of Jesus Christ when it comes to offensive play calling. So it seems like anything they do is going to turn to gold. And this year will be the true test of that, I think, because quarterback is kind of a question mark. Joe Milton is the starter at quarterback. He actually won the job back in 2021 between him and Hendon Hooker. It was Joe Milton who started the season. He played about 4 or 5 games and threw the ball into the river a lot. You know, he threw it over the wide receiver's head, over all the attendees, and out of the stadium and into the river. That is not orange at all. That is yellow. Get that ugly yellow.
100% orange on my screen.
You're colorblind.
I can't do any more orange. The orange is it'll do. I can do this one. Oh, that's better. You like that one better. Hold on. I got you. Hold on. No, get off. Is that better?
You're yeah, that's actually that's very good. Very good. Much better.
Make you happy.
So yeah, Joe Milton, question marks. I mean, I see it personally. I think he gets it all put together this year. This is a dude who has an absolute cannon of an arm. I mean, he has the biggest arm in college football. He can throw it like 90 yards. It's ridiculous how far he can throw the ball, how fast he can throw the ball. Wide receivers are saying like they're spending extra time on the jug machines trying to get used to catching absolute heaters, you know? Joe Milton's also a plus athlete. He's 6'5", 242. He just kind of has all these things going for him that the NFL is going to like. The issue is he's never been good as a starter. He spent his first 2 seasons at Michigan before transferring to Tennessee. Like I said, he won the job from Hendon Hooker, but did win the job at Michigan, just wasn't very good and lost the job there. Lost the job at Tennessee, but stayed at Tennessee and now becomes the starter once again. The question really is, can he improve as a processor? I think we've already actually seen it. He had a 5-6 touchdown interception ratio at Michigan. At Tennessee, he's thrown 12 touchdowns and has yet to throw a pick in an actual game. Josh Heupel said today he's yet to throw a pick in fall camp too. He just doesn't seem to like make the turnover worthy throw. Like even when he misses his wide receiver, he misses the corner. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But
the thing.
It's a thing. He doesn't throw picks. But I think there's things to be impressed by. Looking at PFF, I mean, he has a career turnover-worthy play percentage of just 4%. 66.5 career adjusted completion percentage is pretty all right. 14.1 career average depth of target. That's actually very high. For reference, like Hendon Hooker in this offense was only like 10.3. So Joe Milton's going to push the ball down the field more than Hooker did. And then he just like destroyed Clemson last year in the Orange Bowl. Obviously Hooker tore his ACL. Milton went in. He was all right against Vandy. And then against Clemson in the Orange Bowl, 19 for 28 for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns with a 76.9% adjusted completion percentage. I think Joe Milton in this offense is a very good quarterback. I'm not going to argue yet.
Just all the guys ahead of him are just also very good. Like,
what was Hendon Hooker? QB3 CFF last year? Caleb Reed Hooker? I don't know. But yeah, Joe Milton, I think he takes a step forward. I think he gets drafted in the first. Well, I don't think for sure he gets drafted in the first round, but there is so much potential there for that to happen. All he has to do is put together a good season, not even like a great one. And I think scouts will talk themselves into Joe Milton. And then behind them, they bring in the $8 million man, Nico Iamaleava. He was a 5-star recruit based on like every single service. I personally have him ranked as QB3 in the class. He is 6'5", but he's only 195. He is of slim frame, but he has the high-powered arm. He can make all the throws. He can throw it across the field. He knows how to throw off platform. He can throw at different arm angles. He extends plays out of the pocket very well. Has good footwork. But he did have some accuracy struggles in terms of 11v11 football. Just less than 60% completion percentage in both of his last 2 high school seasons, but more of a 7v7 workout star in the recruiting cycle. And Taven Jackson, the 4-star from last year, transferred to Indiana. We talked about him back in the Big Ten. And that leaves the QB2 role wide open. And it seems to be Nico's the backup. If anything were to happen to Milton, it will be Nico. If Milton were to suck, I would imagine Nico sees the field because it is going to be very difficult to shut up the fans about Nico coming on if Joe Milton sucks. So that's the quarterback situation for now. Nobody really else on the roster that's worth talking about. Running back is going to be a corral approach. Tennessee plays so quickly that they often have to have a different running back for every drive. I mean, they play like 5, 6, 7 plays in a minute of game time, more than that even. So these guys get gassed quickly, but they have to stay on the field because they don't huddle and they don't want the defense to sub. So they play about 8 plays in a row and then get subbed out. And they'll have a good stable of them this year. The main 2 will be Jabari Small and Jalen Wright. They were the main 2 running backs last season. They should be once again. Jabari Small's 5'11", 213, had 140 carries for 785 yards and 9 touchdowns, and 734 yards and 13 touchdowns the year before. He's a very solid back. I think he's a good college back. He's a guy who, despite being a good college back, doesn't really have special traits. He's not like super fast. He's not like super shifty. He's not a great receiver, but he's just a good player. He will get drafted late, will play in training camp, but I don't think he's anything necessarily special. And then Jalen Wright is much of the same, but he does have 90th percentile speed. I think that's the thing that really separates Wright from Small. Wright is also 5'11", also 210. Last season, he had 146 carries for 878 yards and 10 touchdowns. Just 2 receptions last year. That's kind of a red flag. I'd like to see quite a few more receptions actually from Jalen Wright. And he struggled with fumbles in the past. So I think Wright's a little more souped up version of Small. I think it seems to be that Wright's having a better camp than Small this year. So I could see Wright taking the 55% as opposed to the 45% in this rushing attack, which
are you ranking him above him?
It's tough. I mean, I think he should, I guess. The two guys that I'm ranking ahead of both of these guys for Devy, and just like hoping that Jabari Small and Jalen Wright disappear, are Dylan Sampson. First of all, he was a true sophomore, 5'10", 190, but 92nd percentile speed, absolute home run hitter. I mean, Josh Heupel just recruits guys who are super fast and makes the defenses keep up. And Sampson's one of those guys. Last season, 58 carries, 388 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Of those 58 carries, 6 of them went for more than 15 yards. A 73.9 PFF rush grade for Dylan Sampson. He's a pretty good back. I'm worried that he's never going to be a 1A for Tennessee, but he will be that home run hitter kind of back that just takes defenses by surprise, I think. And then Cameron Seldon is the freshman running back that Tennessee adds this year. And Cameron Seldon is him. Cameron Seldon took all these other dudes and ate them for breakfast. Cameron Seldon is 6'2", 220 pounds, with a 98th percentile speed score, 94th percentile power score. According to Campus to Canton, his athletic comps include Rocket Sanders, Adrian Peterson, Herschel Walker, Matt Forte, and Bo Jackson.
Bunch of bums.
I only omitted like 2 names from the full list, and both those guys are also NFL running backs. I think it was Kenyon Drake and Latavius Murray that didn't get the Hall of Fame level hype. And then not only is he a freakish athlete, he was recruited as an athlete, not as a running back. He has like some legit wide receiver skills. He's kind of like a la Cordell Patterson, but like super, just jacked and like faster than Patterson.
Patterson's
and I think
fast.
but is he that fast?
He's like Patterson, but hopefully good at playing running back.
Yeah. I think this staff will use him better than Patterson was used in college, specifically for CFF. And then he's a guy who's going to make it to the NFL. I mean, I think that's just going to guaranteed to happen, like no matter what. When he tests, he will be in the NFL in some facility. Yeah. And then Tennessee loses 2 wide receivers to the draft, Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, both day 2 picks. And so a lot of guys have the chance to step up. Squirrel White is the favorite amongst the Devy community. He was the wide receiver 84 in last year's class, but was the most productive freshman wide receiver at Tennessee. He's just 5'10", 165, but he also has 97th percentile speed, 95th percentile burst. Last season, he had 29 receptions, 475 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including 9 receptions, 108 yards, and a touchdown against Clemson in the Orange Bowl, where both Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman sat out. He had 4 yards per route run last season. So when he got on the field, he made an impact. But he is a guy at 5'10", 165 who is going to be limited to the slot, 91.3% slot rate last season. So Squirrel White could be the guy who breaks out in this offense. And if he is, you are locked and loaded for CFF for 2 seasons because he cannot go pro this year. So I understand the Squirrel White hype, and I think it's very justified. My issue with it is that the beats don't seem to agree. There is one wide receiver that everybody is talking about in terms of beats, and it's not Squirrel White, it's Dante Thornton. Dante Thornton transfers in from Oregon this season and has made huge waves at practice in the spring and the fall. I think somebody just tweeted about him. I think Rivals tweeted about him today, and they were like, what's one player that nobody's talking about that everybody's going to know the name of this year? And it was like, it's Dante Thornton. He's 6'5", 214 pounds with a 90th percentile speed score. So he's super fast, super tall. He's like Kenny Galladay-esque in that way. he hasn't been super productive at Oregon, but he avoided being a year 1-0. His freshman season, he had 9 receptions, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. Sophomore season, 17 receptions, 363 yards, and 1 touchdown. He's a guy who, at 6'5", still played over 30% of his snaps in the slot at Oregon. So that's a little interesting. Probably needs to work on his release a little bit if that's the case. But definitely a guy where the athleticism is there. Apparently, this offense wants to unlock him. He is a guy that we could be talking about as a first-round pick next year, if all goes well for Thornton in Knoxville. And then Brew McCoy, the highly touted USC recruit from years ago, is still in college football, and he is currently at Tennessee. Last season, he had 52 receptions, 667 yards, and 4 touchdowns as the wide receiver 3 behind Hyatt and Tillman. Could very well be the guy who, he was the wide receiver 3 last year. Both those guys moved on. It would make sense for him to be the wide receiver 1, just like it would make sense for Squirrel and Thornton to be the wide receiver 1. That's kind of my issue with CFF and this team, is that we just have no idea which one of these 3 guys is going to be the guy for this year. I feel decently strongly that Brew McCoy is the 3rd out of those 3, but there's been some camp buzz about him being the wide receiver 1 too. He's 6'3", 220. For some reason, I thought about him as a slot guy, but last season he only played 8% of his snaps in the slot, so he's definitely a boundary wide receiver. He's a plus athlete, but I don't think he's not like a super speedster like Thornton and White are. And then there's a few more guys. Ramel Keaton is back for his 5th year. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 4. He could also be the guy who breaks out and leads the team. Tennessee has kind of done that. Cedric Tillman was a guy who nobody thought was anything after his first 2 seasons, and then broke out and broke the mold. So Keaton could be that guy. He's 6'3", 197. He's pretty fast too. 32 receptions, 568 yards, and 5 touchdowns last year. That's good for 1.98 yards per route run, which is pretty close to where we want to see a wide receiver at. And then last year they recruited the wide receiver 35 in the class, Caleb Webb, who was expected to, be the guy over Squirrel White, and ended up doing nothing last year. But he is getting hype. Once again, I think Squirrel and Brew missed time late in spring and didn't play in the spring game, and Caleb Webb had 6 receptions and a touchdown and 100+ yards in the spring game because nobody else was playing. So he's always had potential. He just obviously wasn't ready last year. He's a great athlete, has good quickness. Could be somebody who ends up doing something in the future. I don't see him getting on the field a ton again this year, but I don't know. And then they had a freshman as well, Nathan Leacock, who is another just insane athlete. Tennessee's loving bringing in these insane athletes. I mean, that's exactly what Josh Heupel wants to do, so he's going to do it. He's a 24/7 wide receiver 13 in the class, sub 11 seconds in the 100-meter dash, clocked at 21.4 miles per hour in pads, 6'4", 190. He's a guy who makes sharp breaks, needs to get a little better at releasing off the line of scrimmage, has a huge catch radius at 6'4", tons of leaping ability, plays physically at the catch point. I like Nathan Leacock a lot. I do struggle to see him breaking the year 1-0 mold, but if he does, I think that's a huge sign that he'll be a very good wide receiver. And then tight ends aren't really a big part of this offense, but they will be used a little bit. And they did get a big transfer. Princeton Fant just went to the NFL, so they needed a replacement. They bring in McCallan Castles, who was an all PFF FCS guy. He's 23 years old now, a 5th-year tight end, 6'5", 233, all Big Sky in 2022 at UC Riverside. 30 receptions, 347 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. I think that'll be pretty similar to what his line is this year. And an interesting thing about McCallum Castles, his final 2 years of high school combined 102 receptions, 2,270 yards, and 27 touchdowns. Somehow didn't get recruited to the FBS level, but I think he's gotten a lot of hype since he's gotten on campus. I think McCallum Castles is a player who's a little better than his stats tend to represent. So I think he'll be playing on Sundays in the future as well.
That's a lot. That was a
all I got. Yeah, I went through it as fast as I could.
You did good. You did good, kid. So I don't know what to do with Squirrel White for Devy. Because I like him. I think he's awesome, but he's just so little. Like he could easily. I just feel like the talent.
He's either Tyreek Hill or he's nothing, right?
He's not. The thing that Tyreek Hill is built like a running back, though. Squirrel's not.
Yeah.
He's like he's a successful Tutu Atwell is what you need him to be. Tutu Atwell drafted on day 2, but nothing. Right.
He's faster than Tutu, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't think Tutu was crazy fast for being little. But it's just tough. I don't know, like how much the NFL teams value that skill set. You can get little fast guys on day 3 every single year if that's all you're worried about. I think Squirrel's elusive AF. Like I think he's really good in that capacity. So I want to have more hope for him than I do for like a typical guy. I initially had him in like Mario Williams, but then I was like, I'd rather have Cordell Russell. You know what I mean? But that's I think that's a good spot for him, like right around there.
Like above Samson?
Yeah, above, below, like anywhere in that range, really. I think I'd be fine with him. I have a hard time putting him.
I know he's 5'8", but like if he starts the next 2 seasons and is the guy at Tennessee for 2 seasons, runs a 4.3, he's gonna go in the first round, right?
Maybe. I mean,
he could win back-to-back Bolitnikovs, right? Like,
yeah. Still probably be a round 2 pick, I mean, look at Hyatt, right? And Hyatt's that guy, but tall too. Like Hyatt's like 6'0", stupid fast. Obviously, took a long time to break out. Where I think Squirrel can do that this year and really like destroy this year. But yeah, and then I don't know. I guess we got to rank Dante, but I'm skeptical about these guys that have been. They've been a certain player for 3 years, and now they're going to be a different player. It happens. I mean, Tillman is the case, right, to make for that, but I have a hard time putting Thornton anywhere high until I see it with my own eyes, Yeah,
I mean, he hasn't been nothing at Oregon. That's the thing. Is like if he got all this hype and he was like, 0 catches the last 2 seasons, I would agree. But he's on the field. Yeah.
Oh, where do you want to put him? You want to put him with A.D. Mitchell? I mean, I think Mitchell's a really good player, and we probably have him too low. We definitely have Mitchell too low. But anyways, I like Aiden Williams a lot. I think I'd rather have Aiden Williams heads up over Dante Thornton right now.
But the issue is like Dante Thornton's like athleticism and size combination. If he's good in college, will be like massively wanted by the NFL.
Yeah, sure.
Like if he puts up a 900, 1,000 yards this year, he's a day 2 pick at least, right? 6'5", probably a 4.4.
So he'd be a junior year breakout, right? He's not a year 1-0, but he also hasn't broken out yet. In a significant, significant way, which just gives him a little bit of a weaker prognosis to really succeeding in the NFL. You're right. He would get drafted, but he'd probably be one of those guys that I'd like pump my brakes on, Like I took some Tillman at cost, but I'm like, it's your guy. Like, come on, just the profile doesn't hit that much. But anyways, I could throw him up there with Aiden Williams. I wouldn't put him much higher than that. I'm pessimistic.
I'd rather have him than Eugene Wilson in terms of Devy. Pure Devy.
But you have bad taste, and you're a bad evaluator of talent. Eugene Wilson's 100% better than Dante Thornton.
Eugene Wilson's tiny.
You can put him ahead of Lad McConkey if you want, but not Eugene. And honestly, I think you're nuts. You're nuts to have him anywhere in there. You should have him below here.
I'm gonna make a bet.
Like, do what you want. Yeah, what do you want to bet? And what's
I'll
the
bet
bet?
you Dante Thornton gets drafted ahead of Jermaine Burton this year.
I don't know if I like that bet. I don't think you've Jermaine Burton's
ahead of Jordan Tyson, ahead of Kobe Prentice, ahead of Moose Muhammad, ahead of Anais Smith.
Just bet me he's a top 100 pick.
Okay.
$5.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think he's a day 3. I don't think he's a top 100 pick, but and then for CFF, like, are you putting Thornton ahead of White? I just really still think
it's
White,
so hard to make that decision right now. I just don't know what to think there.
Yeah, they're all running around in shorts, like. Was there a scrimmage? What happened in the scrimmage? No scrimmage? I was able to find fall scrimmage stats for almost all my teams.
What Josh Heupel said about Tennessee's second fall scrimmage. That's a good question. I can keep talking while I do this. They also bring in 2 freshman running backs behind Selden that I think are kind of interesting. One of those is Khalifa Keefe. He is a big-bodied running back. I think he's like 240. He's a guy that like Felix Sharp likes. So that means he's probably worth talking about a little bit. Thornton and McCoy have not played in either of the scrimmages because of their starting status.
No, but Squirrel did.
It doesn't say specifically that he didn't. It's not mentioned at all in this article, actually.
I don't know. You want to move Squirrel down and Thornton up? Feels wrong to me.
It kind of feels wrong to me, too.
But all I got's gut. You know what I mean? So let's leave it alone. Let's leave it alone. Stand on your vibes.
Let's move him below Ted, I think, for sure. But
all right. Okay. I just think if Squirrel's a guy, he's gonna outperform Ted, but who knows, We don't know if he's a guy. We're Ted.
Maybe it's just two guys.
Yeah, could be. They could easily have 2,000-yard-ish guys. That's not a surprising thing at all. All right. Is that it for the SEC East?
Yes. We have 13 teams left.
13 teams left. CFF to rank on the big board.
Unless you want to talk about Army and Navy.
No. Bet the under. That's what I want to say.
Notre Dame and the ACC is left.
Yeah. All right. Let's knock it out, man. Let's get it done. And we finished the crack of 11.
Saturday.
Yeah. Saturday. Try to wrap it up. All right. Well, those of you out there following along, we appreciate you guys. We appreciate your support. Make sure you like, you do the subscribing, you do the following of Kyle at KL Fantasy. You follow me on the Twitterverse. And, we really appreciate your support with the show. Let us know what you want to hear, what you want to see. Happy to hear your opinions. You can tell Kyle how biased and incorrect he is about the Tennessee players. And generally, we love your feedback. Yeah. I ranked them all higher than I would have, so I thought I would put it into arguments. Moved Milton way up for you. But okay. Well, it's been fun. EK signing off. Until next time, guys.